I'm Eric Girard, and I'm the CEO of Girard Training Solutions, a management development firm that focuses on helping new managers transform from high-performing individual contributors to great people managers. I also have an Amazon #1 best-selling book called Lead Like a Pro, The Essential Guide for New Managers. And this show has over 2,000 listeners and is a global top 10% podcast. Today, I am delighted to have Mamie Kanfer Stewart with me. Mamie, welcome to the show. Who are you and what do you do?
Thank you so much, Eric. I'm so excited to be here. I am Mamie Kanfer Stewart. I'm host of the Modern Manager podcast and author of the book Momentum, Creating Effective, Engaging, and Enjoyable Meetings. I have been coaching for a number of years. I run trainings and workshops on meetings and do all kinds of things, including membership and courses to help managers be their best selves and do their best work.
Awesome. And today we are going to focus on how to lead effective meetings. I'm very excited about this because in my 20 years in Silicon Valley, I think I wasted 10 of them in meetings. So I'm really excited to hear your tips.
You're not the only one.
I know. So I'm really excited to hear your take on how to run an effective meeting and not bore people to tears. I remember one meeting where I literally started leaning back from the chair, and then I started pushing my chair back, and I was like physically checking out of the meeting because it was just so painful. My boss pulled me aside later and said, "Problem with the meeting?" "Oh yeah, several." So I am excited to have this conversation with you. So starting from the top, what's the #1 most important thing to do before holding a meeting?
I'm so happy this is where we're starting because it's the one thing that I want everyone who's listening to take away. If you listen to nothing else, listen to this thing, which is do not have a meeting if you don't know what the meeting is trying to achieve. I call this the desired outcome. And it's a different way of thinking about our meetings than our kind of normal brain processing. So it can be a little awkward, but just hang with me for a sec. Most of the time when we're planning a meeting, we think, why are we having this meeting? And the answer is naturally to do something, to discuss, to plan, to decide, to review, to reflect, to whatever. The problem with that line of thinking is we focus on the activities that we're going to do in the meeting and not what the meeting is trying to achieve, not the outcome that the meeting is going to accomplish. And sometimes that means that the outcome is very unclear. If we're going to have a discussion on something, how do we know if we moved our work forward? How do we know if it was an impactful discussion? How do we know if that meeting was worth our time? When you write a desired outcome, you're thinking about the result. And so you want to frame it as a noun. At the end of the meeting, we are going to have a list of next steps. We're going to have a decision on which vendor to move forward with. We are going to have a recommendation to send up the chain. We are going to have alignment on the real root cause of the customer situation, whatever it might be. So before you have your meeting, figure out what the meeting is going to achieve, because that will then impact everything else that you do, including whether you decide that a meeting is really necessary.
And that's the #1 thing that I would amplify. Do we even need to meet, or could we handle this over Slack or email?
Yes, exactly. If you don't know what the meeting is trying to achieve, it's really hard to know if a meeting is the right method to get that job done. But if you know what you're trying to achieve, then you can pause and say, do we need to have a meeting about this? Or could I write a memo instead? Could I record a voice message and send it to my team on Slack? Could I just meet with one person instead of the entire group, saving a lot of people hours from not having to be in that meeting, right? There's so many different ways that we collaborate now and so many different people that we collaborate with that we don't want to just randomly pick people to be in a conversation. And we don't want to have an hour's conversation if we could have gotten the same thing done in a 10-minute voice message, right?
Yeah. I got introduced to Zoom when I started my consulting practice in 2020. And it actually tallies up how much time you've saved, by recording a message rather than dragging a bunch of people together for a meeting. So That's something that I use a lot with my team is Zoom messages back and forth, video messages back and forth, rather than, okay, everybody clear your calendar for an hour and let's get together and hash this thing out. A 5-minute video often does the trick.
Exactly. It's the one reason I tell people you should not be meeting. So there's 7 reasons to meet and 1 reason not to meet. And that one reason that you should not hold a meeting is to share information. If the entire outcome of the meeting is for people to know something, unless that information is super complicated, nuanced, sensitive, meaning it's highly confidential, or it's sensitive in nature, right? If you're giving someone feedback, right? Unless it factors as one of those reasons, you probably shouldn't be having a meeting to communicate that information. Because when you do, one, it's really costly, right? It's hard to get people together, right? It interrupts our day and our flow. Second, not everybody digests information in that way the best, right? In the moment. So if you can give information in other formats, you can always have follow-up conversations on it. And then lastly, people can't refer back to it. So if you're introducing a new policy, it's better to give it to them in writing and let them read it and then have the follow-up to answer questions rather than trying to explain everything in a meeting and have people trying to process the information and then not be able to go back and refer to it later.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Good stuff. So we're already starting off on the right foot by trying to eliminate meetings in the first place. Let's say we've decided that the best thing to do is to actually meet. So we're going to get folks together in a room or on Zoom, and we're going to have a conversation. What's the best way to start a meeting?
Well, this is where your handy-dandy desired outcome comes in. The first thing you should do, well, obviously you should welcome people, right? We want to set the stage, say hello, right? We don't need to run past all of the humanness that comes with having meetings, especially for virtual teams, where this is the time where you actually get to connect. So we'll talk about that in a second. But once you've welcomed everyone, the first thing you should do is remind people what your desired outcome is. What are you trying to achieve? Because we're all coming from the last task we were working on, the last meeting I was just in, dealing with my sick child at home, whatever it might be. We're coming from lots of different places and our brains have to transition into focus on what it is that we're trying to do. And if I don't remember exactly, I just know that this is a meeting about the customer problem, but I don't remember exactly what we're trying to achieve, I might be on the wrong page, right? I might be thinking about solutions and yet we're not even there yet. We're actually just trying to understand what happened here and where was the breakdown. So we want to remind everyone this is what we're trying to achieve in this meeting so that everybody can be working towards that same objective, and it will just streamline the conversation and help everybody participate in positive and enriching ways. And we'll have fewer people going off on tangents, and we'll have fewer times where you're trying to redirect the conversation and fewer people getting frustrated because they feel like they're not participating in the way that feels good for them. So start by reminding people, this is what we've gathered to do. This is what we're trying to achieve today.
And you might even end early and delight everybody in the room. So there's a bonus. Yeah.
That's right. Yes, because if you know what you're trying to achieve, you can say, we achieved it. We got there, right? We don't need to spend the entire hour just because we did. We actually had this happen to be in another meeting I had a couple weeks ago. We had budgeted 90 minutes. We got through the entire agenda in about 65. And I asked the group, do you want to disband? Do you want to have free time back? Or do you want to stay and talk about something else that's important? And we actually identified another topic that we'd been putting off for a while. And we said, great, let's use our remaining 20-ish minutes and dive onto this topic. What are we trying to get out of this? And everyone just said, we just want to brainstorm it. We just want to share some ideas that we've been thinking about. We're not trying to take any action. And it was a great opportunity for the team to use that extra time to think through something that had been kind of on people's minds without having to formalize it into, we need to turn this into something. Everybody just kind of knew, we're just going to get our ideas out on the table and see if there's anything that resonates.
Awesome. Right on. Okay, so Mamie, we've had a great meeting. There's 5 of us in the room or on the Zoom. We achieved our desired outcome. What's the best way to end a meeting?
So as you just said, if you've achieved your desired outcome, acknowledge it, celebrate, take a moment to say like, that was a really productive conversation. Thank you all for participating, right? It can sound a little formulaic and like a little weird, but say it in your own way, right? Do something to acknowledge that this meeting was a good use of time and that you got where you wanted to get to. Then there are two other things you should do. So the first is capture your notes. So note-taking in meetings has lots of different forms and people have lots of different feelings about it. So the way that I recommend teams do note-taking, because you do want to capture something coming out of your conversation. So the way that I recommend teams do this is during the meeting, everyone can take notes for themselves in whatever way works for them. Jot things down on a piece of paper, type some notes on the side, keep ideas on a sticky pad, whatever works for you. Keep track of the things that feel resonant and important. You don't have to write everything down. And having one person assigned to write everything down actually distracts them from participating fully in the meeting. So I don't recommend that teams have a designated note taker unless it's somebody who is specifically joining to be in that role, that you're not expecting them to contribute to the conversation. So instead, right, everyone's taken their own little notes. And then you use your last 5 minutes to go around and say, okay, what do we need to capture as our group notes? And there are 3 things you want to capture. Next steps or tasks, who's going to do what by when? And it's very important to make sure you know who is going to do what, and ideally by when, so that it's very specific. You want to capture decisions. No more of the like, I guess we've decided on XYZ. It's this is the decision, just confirming that's what's going in the notes, that this was the decision. And then lastly what are the highlights or the takeaways? What's the important information that somebody who wasn't in this meeting might need to know? Or if we're looking back at these meeting notes 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years from now, because we're running a similar project, what would be important for us to remember? And it's usually just, 1 or 2 or 3 things. And so you want to capture all of that. And you can do it by asking the group, right? I now as a meeting leader can say, okay, team, I'm going to capture the notes. What are the next steps? And the beauty of doing it this way is, one, you don't have to remember everything, right? The whole team is responsible for thinking about what's important and what are the next steps. And people will volunteer to take on their own tasks, which is really nice. Or if it's like, I heard someone say, I think we're supposed to follow up with the finance team about that. Great. Who is going to do that? Now you have a chance for somebody to raise their hand and say, I'll take that on. Or maybe someone who's not in the meeting is the right person. Mamie's out sick, but I think she's probably the best person to follow up on that. Great. Who is going to follow up with Mamie to make sure she knows that she's responsible for that task and understands what it entails, right? So you're making sure that there's always accountability. So the whole team collects their notes. Now they're typed digitally in those last 5 minutes, and so there's no extra work. You hit send or save so that they're automatically in the right place, and anyone who missed the meeting knows where they are and how to access them. And then the meeting's over, but your work's not over. Then you have to do the follow-up, which we'll save for another time.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that. And back in the day, I used to suggest that there was a dedicated note taker, and the only time I saw that work well was when it was the department admin who was not part of the project who would come in and take notes.
Exactly.
And that was an expensive and cumbersome thing to do. And because the department admin didn't really, she wasn't a facilitator. She wasn't an organization development practitioner. So her notes didn't quite match up with what we were talking about. So we appreciated the effort, but it didn't work anyway. So I like your method a lot better.
Yeah, I've seen that happen where an administrative assistant or an executive assistant comes in to take notes and they don't really understand the conversation, and so they don't really capture it accurately. And sometimes they just capture everything because they don't know what they're supposed to be capturing. And so then you have to sort through all the notes. I've also seen all these new online digital, it'll take notes for you in your Zoom meeting. Personally, I'm not yet at a place where I find those to be really valuable, but they're getting there. So that's something to explore for teams who do all their meetings on Zoom. The other problem with rotating, which was a technique that a lot of teams used to use, where we all take turns being note taker, is that the notes are often very inconsistent across the board. And so it's very hard to find the information that you need because one person's style is bullet points and someone else's style is paragraph form, and somebody takes notes by topic and somebody else takes notes by the kind of activity it is. So, I tracked all the tasks up here and the decisions down there. The more consistent we can be with our meeting notes, the more valuable they get to be for us as a team, as a resource in our work. We kind of think of meeting notes as like, we took them, but then we never look at them again. And that gets to that follow-up piece that I mentioned. Meeting notes are a great resource for your team to keep track of what's going on, for people who weren't in the meeting to know what's going on, and for future projects or for future teams to be able to go back and have lessons learned. So meeting notes don't need to be something that you take and then, hide in the digital file cabinet. They can actually be an active part of your work.
Yep. Yeah, really helpful. I actually use Fathom.video for my note taker for Zoom. And at this point, I kind of agree. It's a lot of it is the novelty factor of having this thing summarize. But it does track word for word who said what, and that can be useful. So reading the summary that it provides, which is pretty good, and then being able to get into the transcript and take apart, okay, who said what, even though it's not 100% accurate, it's pretty good, and it reminds me of what we talked about, which is helpful to me because I have a horrible memory.
Yeah. The challenge with those kinds of transcription services is that team members sometimes don't speak openly when they know it's going to be recorded verbatim. They get nervous about saying something stupid or sharing an idea that gets shot down and then feeling bad about it, or a myriad of other reasons. And so if you're going to use a tool like that, I tell teams, be very explicit. Think about what kinds of meetings you want to use them for and what kind of meetings you don't. Make sure that you're doing other ways of getting team members to speak honestly and openly if you need to foster more psychological safety so that people do feel comfortable. Because nobody wants their meetings to get shut down because people stop participating because they get nervous and worried, and we don't want that, right? We want people to be open and honest and critiquing and sharing ideas. So you might need to partner or kind of balance, if you're going to use a transcription type app or something where people's words are captured and attributed, with other forms of contribution that won't allow their ideas to always be attributed.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Cool. All right. So we've talked about the best way to start a meeting. We've talked about the best way to end a meeting. We've talked about the things that you should do before the meeting to determine if you even need to meet. Let's talk a little bit about common myths about meetings. So what are some of the common myths about meetings, and can you set the record straight, please?
All right. So one of my favorite myths is that my meetings are great. It's everyone else's meetings that are terrible, right? I have yet to meet someone, and I talk to a lot of people about their meetings, and I have yet to meet someone who says, "Oh my gosh, I'm a terrible meeting leader. Please help me." It's always, "Oh my gosh, I sat through the worst meeting yesterday. So-and-so from department X is, or my boss or whatever project lead. Oh, their meetings are such a waste of time." We don't realize that for our team members, that person is actually us. And so we need to kind of open the aperture and realize that we too are leading meetings that for us feel fine because we know what we're trying to accomplish. We have in our head a plan for this. We understand what we're trying to do. But when our team members don't have that same understanding, we might be inviting the wrong people. We might be not engaging them accurately or properly in a way that feels good and enriching. And so for them, that same meeting experience is totally opposite. I'm imagining even that opening story you shared, right? When you were like, this meeting is horrible, right? The meeting leader, if they knew it was horrible, they wouldn't be doing it, right? But they got what they needed out of that meeting. So myth number one, our meetings are also bad meetings. No one is, excused from this. The second myth I want to share is that meetings are a cycle, not an event. We think of meetings as an event. That's the myth. They're not. There are 3 phases to a meeting. Before the meeting, how we all prepare, including what we do as the meeting leader, but also what we ask our team members to do so that they can come in ready to engage. Then we have in the meeting, which is all the activities that you're doing, from having a conversation to doing a brainstorm on a Miro board to round robin sharing of ideas to whatever it might be. And then we have the after the meeting, and that's the follow through and the follow up. It's making sure that the tasks that came out of the meeting actually get done. Because if we don't do anything after the meeting, was it even worth having the meeting, right? Like that's an important part, is actually making sure what comes out of the meeting is actionable and gets actioned. So if it's a decision, that it gets communicated to the people who need to know about it. If there are tasks, they get added into task lists so that they can be tracked and followed up on, and on and on and on. And that often leads back into the next meeting. And so they become this cycle. And when you attend to all three phases, you have more effective meetings and often fewer meetings.
Excellent. Very insightful. This is really cool. This is good stuff. Because I've been running meetings my whole career, and I think I'm pretty darn good at it. So apparently I have work to do. So
Me too. I even still, right? I try to do all the right things, and even still, sometimes I get feedback from colleagues that I could have done a better meeting. And that's okay, because this is actually one of the other myths, right? That we all know how to do meetings because we've been doing them forever, right? Not true at all. Like many skills, we have to learn them. We have to learn the practices. We have to practice doing them. We need to get feedback on them. This is not something that's just natural to all of us, like breathing. Even though we've all been in meetings for, probably from the first day you started your very first job in a corporate setting, you were probably in a meeting. And so we just kind of assume, of course I know how to do this thing because I've been doing it for so long. And that's not true at all. We all need to learn this skill.
I'm laughing because I'm thinking about my first job out of college, and our boss was a complete control freak, and it was really difficult working for her. And she called the whole team together, and we got together in a meeting room / big office, and she started talking about something that really only mattered to her and her number two person, and the rest of us were just sort of window dressing. And the guy next to me literally pulls out a magazine and starts reading the magazine in front of everybody while she's conducting this meeting. And I'm aghast. I'm like, dude, pay attention. He didn't like that, so he had a retort that wasn't nice. And it was like, that's how bad this meeting is. That people are actively in front of you checking out and squabbling over whether they should be paying attention or not. It was instructive. That was a long time ago, and I don't think I've seen anybody pull a magazine out since, but I've seen lots of phones come out during meetings for sure.
Oh yes, I would say it's not as obvious these days. Most of the time when we're in person, we're not pulling out magazines. That's wow. But people do pull out their phones, and when we have virtual meetings, it's very easy to have your email up or your phone out or something else you're working on. I actually was in a meeting where someone was sharing their screen, and then they forgot that they were sharing their screen, and they switched over to their email, and everyone saw that they were now doing their email, right? Like it happens. When I work with teams and team members who are frustrated that their colleagues are multitasking during a meeting, the first thing that we usually explore is, well, obviously that meeting's not valuable for them then. Because if it was a good use of their time, if they were feeling truly engaged, they wouldn't be multitasking, with rare exception, right? Sometimes you just have so many things going on that you don't know how to get all your work done. But for the most part, when we're engaged in a conversation, we're actually paying attention to each other. When we're doing something that's valuable and I feel like my voice is being heard and is an important part of this conversation and that I need to know what's going on so that I can do my best work, then I'm not going to multitask. I multitask when I get bored, when I feel like it doesn't really matter if I hear this information or not. It doesn't really matter what I say because no one's going to listen to me anyways, right? So if you're struggling with people multitasking during your meetings, the first thing you should be looking at is, have I written a desired outcome? Have I communicated that to my people? Are these the right people to help me get to that desired outcome? And then what can we do in our meetings besides talk? Because talking is only one thing. We kind of overload our meetings as like, this is the time we get together to talk. But actually, especially with virtual tools now, you can do so many cool activities, and they are so engaging and fun, and it is a nice mental break from staring at those little boxes on Zoom, but getting people to interact, and you get so much more out of it too, because some people are not verbal communicators as their preference. Some people prefer to write. Some people want to think first and then contribute. So we can mix up our activities, which also help people stay engaged and focused.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. Got to appeal to all the different learning styles and learning preferences and all that good stuff. Well, let's switch the focus now and talk about you. And specifically, I'd like to hear about your Modern Manager Skills Accelerator.
Yes. So this is my signature program. It's a group program working with managers to help them develop the skills and competencies that they need to lead their teams. So every month we do a deep dive into a different topic. So let's see. Right now we just are doing accountability. That's the month of April. Last month we did feedback. The month before was decision making. Prior to that was goal setting. So as you can see, we kind of pick a topic and we do a deep dive into what it takes to do that, sharing tips and practical tips to make it really actionable. Plus, there's a whole community of managers and a whole lot more. But it's one of the easiest and time-friendly ways to develop your skills as a manager.
Awesome. Well, Mamie, thank you so much. This has been a marvelous conversation. It's been a real joy having you here. How can people find you and learn more about your program?
So you can go to themodernmanager.com. That's the main website that has my programs and my podcast. If you're specifically looking for content on meetings, you should go to Meteor, Meeteor.com. That has resources on effective meetings. You can find more about my book there, Momentum, Creating Effective, Engaging, and Enjoyable Meetings. And both places, you'll be able to get in touch with me if you are looking for something else or there's anything else I can do to help you.
Perfect. Great. Well, everyone, thank you so much for listening. Please subscribe to the show and connect with me on LinkedIn. Pick up my book, Lead Like a Pro, The Essential Guide for New Managers, available on Amazon. And the first 2 chapters are free on my website. Just fill in the pop-up and you will get the first 2 chapters in a PDF right to your inbox. If you'd like to chat about how I can help you or your new managers, please drop me a line via my website, gerardtrainingsolutions.com. We will catch you on the next one. Bye-bye.